How can Russia be deprived of the ability to continue its war against Ukraine? Trump talks about lowering the price of oil. The EU is developing measures for a rapid phase-out of Russian liquefied natural gas supplies. And the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, called strikes on oil refineries and oil depots in the Russian Federation the most effective sanctions. How does all this work, and what would happen if these efforts were combined? Let's figure it out. Oil revenues are the foundation of Russia's military economy, which makes oil extraction and processing facilities legitimate targets for Ukraine's defense forces. For example, the Volgograd oil refinery, which was struck by Ukraine's Special Operations Forces on the night of September 18th, supplies fuel to several units of the Russian army at once. The plant is the largest producer of fuel and lubricants in the southern federal district of Russia. Nearly 16 million tons of oil are processed there every year, which accounts for 5.5% of all oil refining in Russia. After a major fire, the plant had to be shut down. That same night, drones successfully attacked Gazprom's petrochemical complex in the city of Salavat, Bashkortostan. According to preliminary information, the LO AVT-4 unit was hit. It is called the heart of the plant. It is this unit that first removes water and salts from the oil and then turns it into gasoline and diesel, as well as kerosene and fuel oil. By the way, this complex is located 1,300 kilometers from the front line in Ukraine.
The most effective sanctions, the ones that work the fastest, are the fires at Russian oil refineries, their terminals, and oil depots. These have significantly limited the operation of the Russian oil industry, and this seriously affects the war. The Russian war is literally a function of oil, a function of gas, and all other Russian energy resources. Now, drones operated by the Security Service of Ukraine are capable of operating at distances of over 1,000 kilometers. Special Operations Forces, drone system units, the Foreign Intelligence Service, and the Main Intelligence Directorate, HUR, are also at work. Thank you all for your accuracy.
Russia's oil revenues have been falling over the past few months. Even the Kremlin admits this. According to the latest data from the Russian Ministry of Finance, in June they dropped by almost 34% year over year. Just in August and September, according to Reuters, as a result of Ukrainian drone attacks, the aggressor country lost about 17% of its refining capacity. And these aren't just numbers. These are millions of tons of fuel that could have reached the market, but instead turned into massive columns of black smoke. At the same time, export routes are being disrupted, costs are rising, and pressure on logistics is increasing. Russia is being forced to patch up holes in its energy sector, but the pace of new attacks is outstripping the speed of repairs.
Ukraine, increasingly frustrated with the pace and direction of peace talks with Russia, has in recent weeks stepped up drone attacks on Russian energy infrastructure, systematically targeting key facilities in an attempt to cut Moscow's export revenues and stir discontent among Russians. At the same time, the Russian Federation, which regularly attacks Ukraine's energy infrastructure, calls these strikes acts of terrorism. From a Reuters publication.
The Russian government has been forced to extend the ban on gasoline exports for now until October 31st. This was done to prevent domestic prices from completely collapsing. But it doesn't seem to be working very well. For example, this week a 92 gasoline hit a new all-time high. Its price rose by 2%, surpassing 73,000 rubles per ton. In addition, the Russian state company Transneft warned producers that they may have to cut production after a series of strikes on critically important export ports. And now the ability to store oil is also limited.
Ukrainian strikes could force Russia, which accounts for 9% of the world's oil production, to eventually cut output. Russia does not have significant oil storage capacity. And Russian industry sources have reported that the Russian Federation has already lost some of its oil export capacity after a Ukrainian drone strike in August 2025 on the US Teluga oil terminal in the Leningrad region. From a report by the Institute for the Study of War.
If, on top of that, the price of Russian oil collapses, Putin will have no choice but to end the war, says US President Donald Trump with confidence. As part of the 18th package of sanctions, the European Union lowered this cap from $60 to $47.50. In addition to the EU countries, the UK, Canada, New Zealand, and Japan have also taken the step. After it became clear that Putin had no intention of ending the war and that all talk of peace was just an attempt to buy time, sanctions have become one of the main levers of pressure on the Russian dictator.
Putin has disappointed me. Every day he loses a lot of his people, more than he kills. In other words, Russian soldiers are dying more often than Ukrainian ones. I don't like seeing what's happening in Ukraine. I hope this ends soon.
Another measure is that the European Union is preparing a legal framework for a fast-track rejection of Russian liquefied natural gas supplies. Earlier, the US president called on EU countries to more actively restrict Moscow's energy exports. And according to Bloomberg, this measure has been included in the new 19th package of sanctions.
The European Commission, the bloc's executive body, is considering including in its new sanctions package a provision for the gradual cessation of all Russian LNG imports by the end of 2027. The EU is also discussing the possibility of ending imports of Russian LNG by amending the so-called Repower EU plan, which aims to end dependence on energy supplies from Moscow. From the Bloomberg publication.
The new 19th package of EU sanctions also includes restrictions against Putin's shadow fleet. An additional 118 vessels have also been sanctioned. Now their total number is 560. In addition, the EU is banning any transactions with Rosneft and Gazprom Neft and is also imposing restrictions on those who purchase Russian fuel in violation of sanctions. This primarily concerns oil traders in third countries, including China. Brussels believes that sanctions need to be tightened until Russia begins peace negotiations.
Unfortunately, over the past month, Russia has shown just how indifferent it is to diplomacy and international law. It has carried out some of the largest drone and missile attacks against Ukraine since the start of the war, striking both government buildings and residential homes, including our EU office in Kiev, the representation of our union. The threats to the European Union are also increasing. In the past 2 weeks, Russian Shahed drones have violated the airspace of both Poland and Romania. These are not the actions of someone seeking peace. President Putin keeps escalating the situation again and again. In response, Europe is ramping up the pressure.
For Russia, all of this means not just a double, but a triple blow. Sanctions, drone attacks on oil refineries, and the drop in oil revenues are step by step destroying the economic foundation of the aggressor country. And it seems that only this kind of language and these kinds of measures are what Putin is able to understand.